Everybody in the game talks about what's the best deck, how do I win, how do I win, how do I win. But what happens when you start winning and your cube rate is still not good and you're still not climbing as fast as you should be? Well, this is the problem that this video aims to solve. It will teach you how to snap correctly. So once you get the deck that you can win consistently with, you can actually climb with it instead of bleeding cubes on a deck that should be gaining massive amounts of cubes because you don't know how to snap. So in this video, I'll teach you how to snap properly and how to recognize the conditions for when you should be snapping for any deck. Chapter 1, Basic Theory. So a lot of people overcomplicate snapping, and I will not overcomplicate snapping. I will give you one simple analogy and one simple rule that you can use for all your snapping, and then the rest of the video will just be playing on this rule and giving you concrete examples on how this rule plays out in an actual game so you can recognize when this rule is the case. But this is the one rule I use for snapping throughout, and this is what gets me super high rank very easily, okay? So basically, in Snap, you have to pretend you're going to a casino house and you are betting on a sports game, let's say. You go to the casino guy and he tells you the odds for the game. Immediately, he tells you the odds for the game is 50-50. When you're betting on any odds, even as the game plays out, he's just giving you a 50-50 odds. This guy never changes his betting odds. So this is a fixed 50-50. So it is fixed. No matter what, the betting odds for a Snap game is fixed at 50-50. You are going to win half your games, you're going to lose half your games. That's what the betting man tells you. However, the stat mechanic is basically pretend you are watching the sports game now and it's a football game and your team scores a point and the other team hasn't scored a point. So now you are up by, like, let's say 1 touchdown. The odds of you winning are probably like 60-40. And you go back to the guy, you ask him the odds, and he's like, it's still 50-50. You can give me double the money now, and I'll give you the same 50-50 odds. So this is what snapping is. You're basically saying, I'll double the money and I can play on these new odds, but he thinks it's still fixed at 50-50. But the new odds are actually like 60-40. So it's like 60% of the time you're winning, 40% of the time you're losing. And this is the basic snap rule. If you are 60-40, if you just use the 60-40 rule, this is basically telling you how to retreat and how not to retreat, and how to snap. So when you are in the 60% of the time you're winning, this should just be a snap. It's an easy snap. 60% of the time you're winning, you're a snap. 40% of the time you're losing, it's a guaranteed retreat. Guaranteed retreat. If you're in between, you have to do an assessment. First of all, if you're in between, your opponent snaps, or you have ahead or behind, or you kind of 40%, that your opponent maybe have information you don't know about that would make you into the 40%, then you definitely retreat in that case. If it's like a 50-50 and it's like a juggernaut play and you know your opponent's playing juggernaut, if juggernaut lands one way, you win, the other way you lose, it's probably a stay. So you can play in this in between, and this is the wiggle room you have when you're snapping or retreating. But fundamentally, if you're not playing by the 60-40 rule, you're probably just not snapping well. This is the fundamental way to snap well. You're winning 60% of your game, you snap almost no matter what. If you're winning 60% of that game, you're losing 40% of that specific board state, you basically retreat no matter what. Simple as that. And this is the basic principle that I use in all my snap games. So now let's get on to the more complicated applications of this principle. Chapter 2, Locations and Early Snapping. So for this example, we will go over the most basic way that people snap. It's on locations. A lot of time, locations can switch the game from a 60-40 favorite percentage to either side. And if your opponent snaps on that and you're on the 40% side, you retreat. If you snap on it because you're on the 60% side, that's a good snap. So the basic way to conceptualize this is I will show you one location and 2 decks and show how both it could be a good location and a bad location for different types of decks. So as you can see, Crimson Cosmos says cards that cost 1, 2, or 3 cannot be played here. A famous example of a deck this is bad for is Surfer, because Surfer basically plays basically their entire game plan is to play 3 drops and basically less, meaning that Madripoor is just, not Madripoor, Crimson Cosmos is just really bad for you because you can't play your 3 drops there. Very simple to conceptualize that you are 40% of the time or more going to lose that game. You are 40% of the time or less going to win that game. So if your opponent snaps on you and there's a Crimson Cosmos on board, you basically always retreat. Very simple to conceptualize. That is a retreat condition when your opponent snaps on you early. On the flip side, you might be wondering, yeah, but when can I snap early? Same location, okay? We're playing Hella. Our entire deck is 4+. We see that Crimson Cosmos on turn 1. We can basically snap that on turn 1. We may get screwed over by the other locations. It gets a bit complicated when there's multiple locations. However, you see that turn 1, you snap on it. Maybe you have a neutral location. You see that turn 2, you snap on it. You have a neutral location, a slightly favored to your opponent location, and then a heavily favored to you. You probably slap on it still. So for Danish Hella, it's very easy to conceptualize this. You're playing basically all 4+. It's very easy to go into that location. You can play a Legion, making basically every location Crimson Cosmos, making you even more favored. You snap on that. More than 60% of the games you're winning. And that's the basic principle behind location snapping. You are winning 60% of the time because of the location that heavily favors you. You snap. You retreat on locations that are really bad for you when your opponent snaps and you don't think you can win, which is more often than not if there's a really bad location. Unless you're playing like a Nocturne or something that can kind of equalize it, or like you have like a Merlin, you're retreating on that location. And sometimes cards like Merlin location changers can give you leverage in like a rickety bridge location or bar with no name location. And then that also becomes a snap condition. So a lot of time locations are a snap condition, whether you can control the location better than your opponent, or if you get some sort of advantage from the location that favors you like 60-40%. A good example of this is bar with no name. If you have more power here, you lose the location. Legion's really, really good with that location. That could be a snap condition. That's something that also heavily favors you because you have that sense of control where your opponent does not. So with that, let's get on to the next section. Chapter 3, good or bad RNG. The second reason to snap is a very simple reason to snap, and this is something that oftentimes you can see when you're favored, when you're not favored. So let's say you're playing out both of your game plans normally, your opponent's playing out their game plan normally, you're playing out your game plan normally, and then you get a good roll of RNG. So you're playing Copycat, and Copycat hits an Iron Man. You now have a 3-5 Iron Man, your opponent almost guaranteed does not draw their Iron Man. What does that tell you? If you're not playing Mr. Negative, they have no way to search for that Iron Man. That tells you you are probably advantaged in that state. You got a good roll of RNG. That is a snap condition in of itself, because a good roll of RNG, Copycat being a 3-5 Iron Man, almost guarantees you a win. It definitely guarantees you like above 60% chance to win. Instant snap, right? This is very hard to recognize on the flip side when your opponent gets good RNG. It's often a good idea to retreat when your opponent gets good RNG, but you don't know when your opponent gets good RNG with information and symmetry cards like this. However, you can tell maybe your opponent gets good RNG. Let's say they play a Jubilee. Jubilee brings down the Infinite, and then they boom, and then they snap you after the Jubilee bring down the Infinite. That's a face-up way to tell your opponent got good RNG. You retreat. Your opponent got good RNG. You retreat. They got a good hand. You retreat. Very simple, right? Another way you can conceptualize it, Gwenpool hits Brood 3 times, Gwenpool hits Mysterio 3 times. That's a snap condition. Your opponent can't tell you had good RNG. You're probably getting 2 cubes at least out of that, if not 4, if not 8 cubes, okay? So there's multiple cards with that where it's like they have an RNG element, but if that RNG element lands in just the right way, it's definitely favoring you 60% of the games to win. So you snap on that. And then on the flip side, there's those face-up examples where like Jubilee pulls an Infinite, boom, you can tell your opponent has a... You tell your opponent might struggle. So apart from RNG, not might struggle, you can tell your opponents to have a good game and you are unfavored. On the flip side, you can also just snap on good hands. Let's say my opening hand is Pedro, and then I get Gwenpool in my hand, and I have a Brood. And then my next turn, I draw, I don't know, Surfer. Like with that hand, snap, easy snap. It doesn't matter what your opponent's playing, what you're doing. If you're playing a good game plan and there is like a specific set of cards that you are really favored to win, let's say you have Mr. Negative and Jane Foster, you basically just always snap that. Yes, you can lose and like your opponent does something random, you can lose, but you're like 60-40% chance you're going to win that game. A good note for this is snap at the latest possible moment without giving up information. Maybe I'll snap before I play Mr. Fantastic, but I won't snap on turn 1, giving me the information for turn 2 because I'm not playing a card till turn 2. A lot of time, it's good to snap on turn 2 instead of turn 1, unless that turn 1 play is what is giving your opponent the information they need to retreat. So those are the 2 basic good RNG scenarios. You get a specific set of cards that is very good to build upon each other, or you get a set of cards, Or you just get like one card that happens to hit very well, whether it be a Gwenpool or a Copycat, and they'll favor you 60% of the time. And that you can snap on, and then you can treat on your opponent, like bringing down an Infinite with Jubilee. So snap on good RNG, retreat on bad RNG if you can tell there's bad RNG on your side. Chapter 4, Bad Hands. I won't go too long on this chapter, but this chapter plays off of the last chapter. Sometimes you can tell, depending on what your opponent's deck is, you can tell when they are having a bad hand. And when your opponent has a bad hand and you're just playing a normal game plan, you don't necessarily have good RNG, but you're just playing a normal game plan. A lot of time, you're favored 60-40% of the time, despite your hand not being great. It's just your opponent drawing even worse. A good example of this is, let's say you're playing against a Surfer deck and your opponent doesn't draw any other 2-drops. Let's say you're playing against basically any deck and your opponent doesn't draw any other 2-drops, and then they play a 3-drop. And you're like, your opponent has 3 to 4 2-drops on the your opponent has 3 to 4 2-drops in the deck. They're relying on the 2-drop. They don't draw any 2-drop. Snap. Instant snap. Basically, you realize your opponent didn't draw any 2-drop, and then they played a 3-drop that told you they're not playing like hello, whatever. You can very easily snap on that and just say your opponent just drew worse than you. They didn't draw their early game. You drew your early game. You're winning because of that. It's a very simple thing to just bully snap when your opponent looks like they're just having a bad draw, because a lot of time you're favored 60-40% to win. There might be exception to this if you're playing an ultra combo deck and they play, I don't know, a Dakin on turn 3. Maybe you wait a turn to see if they have the Frigga or they have the Bullseye to like recover that. But if they're not playing a combo deck and they just play like a normal Sarah control card, if you see they're like a Sarah control tech deck and then they drew none of their 2-drops, I just snap on that. I just bully slap on that, and you're saying you're favored most of the time to win that game because your opponent drew bad, and that is a snap condition of itself. And this is a more high-level snap condition when you're not snapping on your good stuff, you're just snapping on your opponent's downfall, which is a very, very good way to get cube equity. But your opponent time often will retreat on that as well because they know they're playing bad. Like, they know they're not doing good stuff, and then they leave. Chapter 5, Dead Matchups. So the last thing to cover in this video is how to snap on what I consider dead matchups. Every deck has a few matchups they're really like, they're like 30-70 unfavored. So it's like they're only winning 30% of the games and the opponent's winning 70% of the games. And if you are in that 70% of the game from the start and you're like, oh, this is like my god matchup where I'm like almost always winning against this specific matchup, snap on it super aggressively. It's like, basically, unless the locations are like incredibly favored on their side, just snap on it. If it seems like the game's in a neutral state or even slightly favored in their end, like in theory, but like the matchup is that bad for them, just snap on it. Very easy way to get a lot of cubes is just snap on your best matchups basically all the time. A good example of this is I will bring basically 3 cards into the fold and explain to you how this dynamic works, okay? I'm playing Captain Carter deck, so I'm playing Surfer, and my idea is to double up my buffs a lot of the time. I'm doubling all buffs, and how cards like Torch and Carter work is if you afflict that, basically your affliction gets double the value because they're bringing, for Carter, they're bringing the affliction to the behind row as well, and then for something like Torch, he's bringing the affliction onto himself, and like that -1 is actually -2 because when you do fill that location, he doesn't double up that number. So affliction is like particularly good against these cards, right? So a lot of time, affliction is kind of a dead matchup for Surfer. So let's say you're playing in a fixture deck, you realize your opponent's running Surfer. Boom, snap. You are so favored in that matchup. Boom, snap. Your opponent doesn't retreat. You just got 2 cubes more often than not. You just played by the 60-40% rule very easily. You said, oh, I have the God matchup. Beat my opponent with it. And they retreat. On the flip side, if I see my opponent playing affliction, they put down a man thing on turn 3, and I'm like, God damn, they're playing affliction. I'm playing Surfer. They snap me. Retreat. You're so unfavored in that. You're like 40%, 30% chance to win. Opponent has 60-70% chance to win. Very easy matchups. You have a really bad matchup, get the hell out of there. You have a really good matchup, bully your opponent if he stays in there. On the flip side to this dynamic is you're a Luke Cage deck, you have Luke Cage in hand, your opponent snaps you with affliction, snap them back. Boom, you're 60-40% chance favored. Boom, snap him back. You basically just bully snapped him. You might even get 8 cubes out of this. Like, you are super favored in this situation. And a card like Luke Cage entirely flips that dynamic on its head, where now you are incredibly favored, right? So that is the key to snap conditions all in all. And this is the key on matchups. Matchups is recognize when you were super ahead, because let's say you have a tech card like Mobius against negative, Luke Cage against Affliction, just snap on that because that tech card makes you more than 60% chance favorite. Or if you have a matchup and you're playing against an opponent and you're pretty sure that matchup's basically a dead matchup unless they have that one tech card, and it's unlikely they have that one tech card, then snap against them and you're like, oh, this Affliction matchup's a dead matchup for them. I'm snapping on it, and then I'm going to get a bunch of keeps on average from them. And that's the basic snap theory all in all. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. And for those of you who don't know, I also have a Twitch channel at Heart of the Cards. Well, Heart OTC. Follow me there if you haven't already. And I'm also starting an anime channel on my free time, which is Heart OTC Anime. So also check me out there. If you guys want either of those links, they are in the description to my my main channel page. So go check it out there, or just write it out in YouTube and you'll find me. So peace out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.